So this week we're making bagels. They are so easy to make. I really encourage you to try these. Even if you are a complete beginner at baking, you will succeed at making these, trust me. You only need a few ingredients and some basic equipment and a little bit of spare time. Read the video description for a full recipe. So let's get right into it. Start with the equipment that we'll use. You'll need a tray with parchment paper, a rack, a pan for boiling your bagels, you need a bowl to mix your dough in, scales, scraper, little pastry brush, temperature probe as always, and a spatula to lift your bagels out of the water. Now onto the ingredients. Strong white bread flour, water, some yeast, some malt powder, salt, seeds of your choice, some malt syrup for boiling, or you can use honey if you don't have this, some semolina, and an egg for brushing. Now I know my kitchen is around 20 degrees Celsius, so I want my water to be around 21-22 degrees C. Now let's begin. Get your bowl, add your water, the yeast, the salt, the malt powder. You can make these bagels without the malt powder. What the malt powder does, gives them a distinct malty flavor. Once you've added all that, give it a good mix, mainly to dissolve any large salt flakes, and then add the flour. Now get your little dough scraper and give it a good mix. And then tip it out on your table and we'll start working it. This is quite a dry dough, 58% hydration, so I'll just use a regular kneading method. What I like to do is using the heel of my right hand, press down and forwards, and using the fingers of my left hand, I fold the piece of dough under the heel of my right hand and turn as needed and repeat. Once you've done this a few times, it'll become like second nature, you won't even think about it. You want to knead the dough for around 5 to 7 minutes until decent gluten development. The dough should become smooth and less sticky and a little bit stretchy. So bring it all together and soon we'll be ready to proof it. As you can see, it's nice and elastic and it's got some strength to it. Now collect it into a little bowl by stretching the edges over the middle, going around in a circle until you reach the point where you started. And then roll it against the table. Make sure the smooth side points upwards. Now get your bowl, place your dough ball in it and take the temperature of the dough. You want this to be around 23 to 24 degrees Celsius. Now we'll cover it and let it proof for 1 hour. It should puff up slightly in that time, but the main part of the proofing will be done in the fridge overnight. So after the first hour of proofing, you want to take your dough, place it on your work surface, and we'll divide it now. You don't need to use any flour at this point, the dough is quite dry, so it's not going to stick to the table. So to divide it, get your scales, and using your dough scraper, cut the dough in 6 equal parts of around 120 grams each. The good thing about this recipe is that you can make these bagels, for instance on Friday evening, you shape them, you place them in your fridge overnight, then you can finish baking them off on Saturday morning for breakfast. So now we need to pre-shape our dough pieces into tight little cylinders. Flatten the dough piece out, fold in the edges over the middle, and then the top and the bottom, and then flip them upside down so the smooth side is pointing up and tighten them against the table. You just want a general shape of a little cylinder basically. Once you've done all of them, you want to cover them up and let the dough relax for around 10 minutes. This will make it a lot easier to roll it out and it will help with the final shaping. So to shape the bagel, grab a dough piece and roll it out on your table to a length of about 25 centimeters or so. You want it long enough that you can wrap it around the broadest part of your hand and overlap the ends in your palm. And then just rub against the table to seal it. Simple, right? Like I said, they're really easy and quite fun to make. And if you mess it up, don't worry, you got still 5 pieces to practice on. They don't have to be perfect. You're not working in a bakery, right? If they're a bit wonky, just gives them a bit of character. Grab a tray, sprinkle it generously with semolina, and place your bagels on it. You want a light dusting of flour and then cover them with cling film. Just don't wrap them up too tight, otherwise the cling film might still stick. Yeah, and then place them in your fridge and leave them in there for at least 6 hours, but they can stay in there for longer. I think I left these for about 18 hours in fridge and they were still fine. Because we're not using too much yeast, they will not overproof. So it's the next day. As you can see, they're puffed up a little bit, but not too much, and we're ready to boil them. This will be quite a quick process, so before you do anything, I would suggest preheating your oven to 240 degrees Celsius, fan off, or 220 with the fan on. Now get your water boiling and add a couple of good old tablespoons of the malt syrup, or honey if you're using honey. Give it a good stir and bring it back up to the boil. The syrup will give them that distinct crust. Now just boil them in batches. I managed to fit 3 bagels in a pan at one time. Boil them for around 1 minute. Flip them over halfway through. They will puff up quite a lot whilst boiling. That's a good sign. And then place them on your rack to drain them. And repeat until you've done all the bagels. And yes, 1 minute of boiling is sufficient. You don't need to do any longer than that. So now we can top them with our seeds. So get your tray ready with the parchment paper. I would suggest sprinkling it with semolina. My paper was for some reason quite sticky, so I wouldn't risk it. Sprinkle generously to prevent them from sticking. Now you want to get the egg and brush the bagels with it. Just a nice even coat. This will make the seeds stick to them. If you don't use egg, trust me, when you cut them all the seeds will come off and it'll just be a mess. So once you finish brushing comes the fun part. Pick up the bagel and place its smooth sides straight into your seeds. You could also sprinkle the seeds on top, but you will not get the same amount of coverage. I prefer this method. You get loads of seeds on your bagel. And then place them straight on your tray, ready for baking. Just make sure your oven is preheated properly. Give it enough time because this process only took about 10 minutes. And now they're ready to bake. Bake them for around 15 minutes. They should puff up considerably and get a nice golden crust. And that's the bagel. Simple, right? What you want to do now is let them cool down on the rack before you cut them open. And then get your favorite toppings. I got some cream cheese, some salmon, some cucumber, a little bit of black pepper here. But you can fill these with whatever you like. And as always, if you have any questions or suggestions, write them down in comments. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe because I post every Wednesday. Check out my other recipes for sweet bakes and also sourdough bread. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.